Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
Equinox threshold. Dr. Marcus Blackwood adjusted the aperture of his camera as the setting sun bathed the ancient stone circle in amber light. The isolation was precisely what he needed, away from the cacophony of academia, where his theories were often met with raised eyebrows and thinly veiled condescension. If only Dr. Richards could see this, he muttered to himself, thinking of his department rival whose narrow-minded approach to archaeology had always irked him. He'd probably claim it's just another primitive calendar, the unimaginative git. As the university's leading anthropologist specializing in pre-Celtic ritual sites, Marcus had spent months securing permission to document the secluded monument on private Scottish estate land. The Earl of Glencairn had been particularly difficult to persuade. "I assure you, Lord Glencairn, I won't disturb your stones," Marcus had promised during their meeting at the estate's palatial library. "I simply wish to document them." "That's what the last fellow said," the elderly earl had replied, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. "Found him dancing naked around my stones at midnight, claimed they were speaking to him. Absolute lunacy." Marcus had suppressed a smile. "I can guarantee there will be no naked dancing, my lord, though I can't promise what the stones might say." The earl's stern face had cracked into an unexpected grin. "Very well, Dr. Blackwood, but I warn you, local legends suggest those who linger too long at the circle during the equinox return. Changed." Marcus had dismissed the warning as typical aristocratic dramatics, the kind of folklore landowners used to keep the curious at bay. Now, positioning his tripod on the soft heather-covered ground, those words echoed with unexpected resonance. Local legends claimed the stones possessed unique properties during the equinox, precisely why he had timed his solitary expedition to coincide with the autumn crossing. The megaliths loomed around him like silent sentinels, their weathered surfaces telling stories science had yet to decode. "Perfect," he murmured, capturing the alignment of the central altar stone with the descending sun. The megalith's surface was covered in spiraling carvings that defied traditional classification, neither fully Celtic nor Pictish, but something more ancient and enigmatic. At 42, Marcus had built his academic reputation on challenging conventional archaeological narratives. His last department meeting still rankled in his memory. "Really, Blackwood," Department Chair Dr. Eleanor Hayes had said with that particularly infuriating smile, "astronomical alignments are hardly revolutionary concepts in megalithic studies." "It's not the alignments themselves, Eleanor," he'd countered, tapping his laser pointer on the projection screen with more force than necessary. "It's the mathematical precision combined with these recurring spiral motifs that suggest a sophisticated understanding of astronomical phenomena beyond mere seasonal markers." "Or," interjected Dr. Richards, "primitive humans simply liked drawing swirly patterns while tracking the sun. Occam's razor and all that." The room had filled with polite laughter, and Marcus had mentally added another tally to his reasons to work alone list. Tall and lean with angular features and prematurely silver-streaked dark hair, he moved with the cautious precision of someone accustomed to handling fragile artifacts. His colleagues at Edinburgh University had dismissed the site's significance, but the unusual astronomical alignments and distinctive markings had convinced him it warranted deeper investigation. "Not so primitive now, are you?" he whispered to the stones, noting how the evening light caught the depths of the carvings. "You've been waiting for someone to read you properly." As the sun touched the horizon, something extraordinary happened. The carved spirals began to gleam with an opalescent luminescence that seemed to originate from within the stone itself. Marcus checked his equipment settings, certain he was witnessing some trick of light refraction. "Phosphorescent minerals activated by specific light wavelengths," he theorized aloud, stepping closer to examine the phenomenon. "Remarkable preservation after thousands of years. This could redefine our understanding of Neolithic technological capabilities." The central altar stone now emitted a soft humming vibration that registered more as sensation than sound. It reminded him of standing near large speakers during a concert, when bass notes become tactile experiences rather than auditory ones. Perhaps resonant frequencies triggered by thermal expansion during sunset, he mused, mentally drafting the paper that would finally silence Richards and his ilk. Curiosity overriding caution, Marcus placed his palm on the stone surface to measure the vibration frequency. In retrospect, he would later acknowledge this as the kind of impulsive decision that archaeological safety protocols explicitly warned against. The connection was immediate and electric, a surge of energy flowing from the stone into his body with such intensity that he couldn't pull away. His mind flashed to countless horror films where the protagonist ignores obvious warning signs, and he had the absurd thought, so this is how the expendable academic dies in Act 1. The luminescence traveled up his arm in spiraling patterns identical to the carvings, spreading across his torso in pulsing waves. His scientific mind cataloged the impossible. The stone was transferring something into him, molecules of light converting to matter as they integrated with his cellular structure. "This isn't possible," he gasped, finally breaking contact as he stumbled backward. The glow remained beneath his skin, flowing through what felt like every capillary and nerve ending. His entire body tingled with increasing intensity, nerve receptors firing in patterns he'd never experienced. Some kind of hallucinogenic compound leaching from the stone, he rationalized, even as the logical part of his brain noted that topical absorption couldn't possibly account for such rapid effects. Or perhaps a defensive reaction to airborne spores from the surrounding vegetation. The transformation began subtly at first. Marcus felt a curious softening beneath his skin, as though the very composition of his tissues was becoming more fluid. His hands, always strong with prominent veins and square fingers, began to change before his eyes, the fingers elongating slightly while becoming more tapered, joints becoming less pronounced as the skin smoothed and softened visibly. "Fascinating," he whispered, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding alarm. "The dermal layer appears to be restructuring at the molecular level." He watched in astonishment as the coarse dark hair on his knuckles receded, disappearing entirely as his skin became luminously smooth. The veins that had always mapped his hands like blue rivers beneath thin parchment faded from prominence, creating an unblemished landscape where once there had been a topography of tendons and vessels. His nails, previously trimmed short, lengthened slightly and developed a naturally perfect oval shape, the cuticles retracting to reveal elegant half-moons at their bases. Some kind of hallucination, he rationalized, though the analytical part of his brain noted that hallucinations rarely presented with such consistent progressive patterns. He felt lightheaded but remarkably pain-free as the changes continued to spread. "If this is dying," he murmured with unexpected humor, "at least it's uniquely on brand for an anthropologist, transformed by the very artifacts I came to study." The transformation accelerated as the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the stone circle illuminated only by the ethereal glow emanating from his changing body. Marcus watched with scientific fascination, partially masking growing alarm as his forearms lost their coarse hair. Skin texture refining to a silken smoothness that caught the mysterious light in ways his former skin never could. "Good Lord," he observed, running newly tapered fingers along his arm, "I've spent a fortune on moisturizers that couldn't achieve this effect." The most dramatic shift began in his facial structure, bones seeming to soften and realign beneath the surface. His pronounced jawline gradually rounded, cheekbones becoming more prominent as his face narrowed slightly into a more oval shape. The strange tingling intensified around his eye sockets, where the orbital bones subtly reconfigured, creating slightly more pronounced almond shapes with higher arched brows. His nose refined itself, becoming smaller and more delicate while maintaining a character-giving slight curve. His lips tingled intensely as they filled out, particularly the upper lip which developed a pronounced Cupid's bow. The sensation reminded him of those trendy lip plumping glosses his ex-girlfriend Sophia had once convinced him to try, just for fun, except this effect was permanent and far more profound. "Extraordinary," he whispered, voice catching as his vocal cords began their own transformation, the pitch wobbling upward into an alto register. The sensation traveled down his throat, where his Adam's apple seemed to dissolve beneath increasingly smooth skin. Even my voice, he or increasingly she, said experimentally, each word emerging in a melodic timbre that vibrated differently through restructured sinus cavities and a more delicate laryngeal structure. The acoustic properties have completely transformed. Perhaps most remarkable was his hair. The short, practical cut he'd worn for decades began to change texture and length, growing at an impossible rate. The silver streaks multiplied, spreading until his entire head of hair shimmered like moonlight, lengthening past his shoulders in soft waves that felt impossibly light and silken against his increasingly sensitive neck and back. The follicles themselves seemed to be replicating at supernatural speed, each strand thickening and developing a resilient elasticity his former hair had never possessed. If my colleagues could see this, he murmured, gathering a handful of the luminous strands, they'd be fighting to publish before me. Megalithic makeovers, how ancient stones revolutionized cosmetic transformation. His body's fundamental proportions began shifting with methodical precision. His shoulders narrowed significantly, collarbones becoming more prominent as the underlying skeletal structure refined itself. The reconfiguration produced several distinct pops that echoed in the silent circle, bones restructuring themselves with architectural precision. This defies every principle of physiology, he observed, running newly delicate fingers along his collarbones, which now created elegant hollows at the base of his neck. Bone remodeling should take months, not minutes. Simultaneously, his hips expanded outward, pelvic bones, shifting with dull pops that echoed in the stone circle as the framework widened to create a feminine curvature. His waist drew inward dramatically, creating a pronounced hourglass silhouette that his masculine frame had never possessed. He could feel internal organs shifting position to accommodate the new configuration, a sensation that was disconcerting yet remarkably free from pain. My iliac crest is completely restructuring, he noted with clinical detachment that belied the extraordinary nature of what was happening. The pelvic angle is increasing to approximately 30 degrees from what must have been closer to 15. The most intense sensations gathered in his chest as his pectoral muscles softened, tissue redistributing beneath the skin into perfectly formed breasts. The development felt like warm pressure expanding outward from within, nerve endings multiplying with each passing second. What began as subtle swelling rapidly progressed to unmistakable feminine contours, the areolas darkening and expanding while nipples became markedly more prominent. Good heavens, he gasped, the new weight on his chest creating unfamiliar pressure points along his spine. These are rather substantial. When the growth stabilized, the weight of them created an entirely new awareness of his transformed torso, a constant presence that pulled slightly against his spine, creating subtle adjustments to his posture. His center of gravity had shifted significantly, requiring a new balance that his body was already instinctively accommodating. I owe Sophia an apology, he mused, recalling how he'd once dismissed her complaints about back pain. These are indeed a considerable burden to carry. His legs trembled with the continuing transformation, muscles retaining strength while redistributing into more curved contours. His thighs developed a gentle outward curve while his calves defined themselves more dramatically. Even his feet reduced by nearly a size and a half, arches becoming more pronounced as the overall shape narrowed and refined. My entire musculoskeletal system is reconfiguring, he observed, extending a leg to examine the new proportions. The quadriceps have maintained mass but redistributed into a completely different aesthetic pattern. The final phase of transformation centered on his reproductive anatomy, a complex reorganization that left him momentarily breathless against one of the standing stones. What had been external reconfigured through a process that defied anatomical understanding, external structures folding inward with remarkable biological precision. That was intense, he whispered when the sensation subsided, aware of profound emptiness where there had once been familiar presence and new sensitive tissues where none had existed before. The restructuring completed itself with remarkable biological ingenuity, internal organs shifting to create space for new anatomical architecture. When the transformation finally completed, Marcus stood alone in the ancient circle, fundamentally altered by forces beyond scientific explanation. The person who had arrived as Dr. Marcus Blackwood had physically transformed into a striking woman in her late 30s, with flowing silver-white hair and the same intelligent green eyes, now framed by thicker lashes and more defined brows. His clothing hung awkwardly on his transformed frame, shirt billowing at the narrowed waist while straining across his new chest, pants too loose at the waist while tight across the rounded hips. He rolled up sleeves that now extended past his wrists and tightened his belt to the final notch. "Well," he said with a surprised laugh at the melodic voice that emerged, "this certainly puts a new spin on field research." He glanced down at his transformed body with a mixture of scientific fascination and wry amusement. "I've heard of academics changing positions, but this seems rather extreme." "The Equinox threshold," he whispered, voice melodious and unfamiliar. The academic in him immediately connected his experience with ancient texts he'd previously dismissed as metaphorical, accounts of sacred sites where boundaries dissolved during astronomical alignments, allowing transformation of matter, spirit, and form. "The Pictish chronicles mentioned boundary dissolution," he mused, recalling obscure texts from the university archives. "During the balancing of seasons, when day equals night, the veil grows thin and flesh becomes malleable to those who bear the ancient touch. I always assumed it was metaphorical drivel." As moonlight replaced the sun's final rays, the standing stones ceased their luminescence, returning to ordinary weathered rock. The transformation, however, showed no signs of reversing. His new body felt solid and real, not a temporary manifestation, but a complete reconfiguration of his physical form. "Richards would have an aneurysm if he could see me now," he said with unexpected laughter. "He's spent decades arguing against transformative rituals in megalithic cultures, and I've become living evidence." With hands that trembled slightly, more slender fingers with perfect oval nails, he retrieved his phone to illuminate the central altar stone. The carvings that had glowed so brilliantly now displayed different patterns, the spirals reconfigured into new forms that seemed to tell a story of transformation and rebirth. "The petroglyphs have changed," he noted with professional interest that momentarily overshadowed his personal situation. "The symbolism appears to have shifted from masculine to feminine representation. The vertical lines have curved, and the angular junctions have softened into flowing connections." Experimentally, he took a few steps, immediately noticing how differently his new body moved through space. His center of gravity had shifted dramatically, creating a natural sway to his walk that he had to consciously moderate. "Good Lord," he murmured, catching himself against a stone. "It's like learning to walk on a ship in high seas." Marcus spent the night documenting everything, photographing the altered carvings and his transformed body with scientific thoroughness. The anthropologist in him recognized he was experiencing something cultures throughout history had described, but modern science had dismissed: a genuine transmutation of form catalyzed by forces outside conventional understanding. "If I ever manage to publish this," he said to the voice recorder on his phone, "I'll either win the Nobel Prize or be committed to psychiatric care. Perhaps both, in that order." As dawn approached, he made his way carefully down the hillside to his rented cottage, each step an adjustment to his altered center of gravity and the different way his body now moved through space. His brain was rapidly adapting to the new proprioception, his mental map of his body's dimensions and capabilities rewiring with remarkable efficiency. "This gives entirely new meaning to walking in someone else's shoes," he remarked, negotiating the uneven path with growing confidence. "Or someone else's body, as it were." Inside the cottage, he faced the full-length mirror for the first comprehensive view of his transformation. The woman reflected back shared certain features with Marcus: the same intelligent eyes, similar facial structure though dramatically softened, and the distinctive silver hair that had once been merely streaked but now cascaded in luminous waves past her shoulders. "Well, hello there," he said to the reflection, attempting to inject humor into the extraordinary situation. I suppose we'll be seeing rather a lot of each other. The symmetry of the transformation was remarkable, as though some cosmic artist had reimagined his male form with perfect feminine counterparts to each feature. His formerly strong jaw had softened into a graceful curve that maintained character without angularity. His once prominent brow had refined itself into elegant arches that framed eyes now enhanced by naturally thicker lashes. Even his ears had reduced in size, lying closer to his head with delicately curved lobes that peeked through the silver cascade of hair. "Still me," he said softly, voice registering as both foreign and strangely right. Different form, same consciousness. He couldn't help but examine his new physical dimensions with clinical interest. His shoulders, once broad from years of carrying heavy field equipment, had narrowed significantly while maintaining athletic definition. His chest had developed into perfectly proportioned breasts that strained against his button-down shirt, creating gaps between the buttons that revealed glimpses of newly smooth skin. "These will require entirely different support systems," he noted pragmatically, cupping their weight experimentally, "and a complete wardrobe overhaul." His waist had narrowed dramatically, creating a pronounced curve that flowed outward to hips now several inches wider than before. His formerly flat abdomen had developed a subtle softness that complemented the new proportions without compromising the overall athletic build he'd maintained through years of fieldwork. Remarkable how the transformation maintained physical conditioning while completely reconfiguring fat distribution patterns, he observed, turning to examine his profile. The gluteal muscles have retained their strength but completely restructured their shape. Over the following days, Marcus, who gradually began thinking of herself as Mara, a name that felt connected to the ancient site, documented every aspect of her transformation. Her academic mind approached the experience with analytical curiosity, cataloging the physiological changes while also noting the psychological adaptations. "Day 3 of transformation," she recorded into her journal. "The neurological adaptation continues to astonish. My brain has already remapped its proprioceptive understanding to accommodate the new physical dimensions. I navigate doorways without miscalculating shoulder width and can accurately estimate how much space I occupy, evidence of extraordinary neuroplasticity." Her body's proportions had achieved perfect feminine symmetry, breasts proportionate to her frame, waist creating a dramatic curve between ribs and hips, legs shaped with natural definition. Her movements, initially awkward, became increasingly fluid as her brain remapped its understanding of her physical dimensions. "It's as though I've spent decades inhabiting a vehicle with one set of handling characteristics," she noted, "and suddenly been transferred to an entirely different model. The controls are in similar positions but respond with completely different sensitivity." Even her facial expressions registered differently on her transformed features, emotions conveyed through subtleties her male countenance had never possessed. She discovered her new face was remarkably expressive, capable of communicating nuanced reactions that her formerly more stoic features had concealed. "My emotional responses remain consistent," she recorded, "but their physical manifestation has completely transformed. A raised eyebrow now communicates volumes where before I might have needed several sentences of explanation." The most profound discovery was how seamlessly her consciousness adapted to the transformed physiology. Her intellect, memories, and fundamental identity remained intact while integrating with her new form. She was neither entirely Marcus nor someone entirely new, but a continuation, the same consciousness experiencing existence through a fundamentally altered physical framework. The ancient texts referred to this as vessel transformation, essence preservation, she noted in her journal. "What I dismissed as metaphysical nonsense appears to be the most accurate description of my experience." After a week of private adjustment and documentation, Mara faced the inevitable question of how to proceed. Her academic position, personal relationships, legal identity, all were connected to a physical form that no longer existed. Yet her research had taken an unprecedented turn, experiencing firsthand what countless ancient texts had described as sacred transformation. "What an extraordinary predicament," she said to her reflection, having grown increasingly comfortable with her transformed appearance. "I've become the most significant archaeological discovery of the century, and I can't even publish my findings without becoming a laboratory specimen myself." The anthropologist who had sought to document an ancient site had become the most significant artifact of her own research. Living evidence of transformative forces modern science had yet to categorize. "Richards would never let me hear the end of this," she mused with unexpected humor. "He'd probably claim I orchestrated the whole thing for publicity. Desperate for tenure, Blackwood? This seems rather extreme." Mara packed her research materials and the extensive documentation of her transformation, adding one final journal entry before departing the cottage. The ancients understood thresholds not as boundaries, but as gateways between states of being. What we dismiss as metaphor or myth may simply be phenomena our current scientific framework lacks the vocabulary to describe. I entered the stone circle as one version of myself and emerged as another, not replaced but transformed, not diminished but reconfigured. The equinox threshold appears to manifest change already latent within the individual, a potential form rather than an arbitrary alteration. This suggests transformation is not imposed but revealed, bringing to physical manifestation aspects of identity that exist beyond our conventional understanding of biological determinism. As both researcher and subject, I now navigate the unprecedented territory of continuing my life's work from a dramatically altered perspective. The anthropologist in me recognizes this as the most profound fieldwork opportunity imaginable, experiencing firsthand how identity transcends and adapts to physical form. Perhaps in this transformation lies the true purpose of the ancient site, not merely marking astronomical events, but facilitating profound personal evolution at moments when cosmic energies align to make such transitions possible. I remain, in essence if not in form, the same seeker of knowledge who first stepped into that stone circle, now uniquely positioned to bridge the divide between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. As the sun rose on her final day at the cottage, Mara gathered her belongings and stepped out into the morning light. Her transformed body moved with increasing naturalness, each step carrying her further from the person she had been and closer to the person she was becoming. "Well, Marcus," she murmured to herself with a wry smile, "you always wanted to revolutionize the field. Be careful what you wish for." She paused at the edge of the property, looking back toward the distant stone circle silhouetted against the dawn sky. The transformation had not been an ending, but a beginning, not a loss of self, but an expansion of possibilities. The anthropologist who had sought to understand ancient rituals had instead become living proof of their efficacy, embodying the transformation that countless forgotten ceremonies had sought to facilitate. With renewed purpose, Myra continued down the path, her silver hair catching the morning light as she moved with growing confidence toward whatever awaited beyond the threshold she had already crossed.